Thanks for joining us for the KOHO 101 Community Connection Podcast, a look at business in the greater Wenatchee area.
It's the KOHO Morning Show. Great to have you with us on this Tuesday edition of the program, and pleased to have Shiloh Burgess back with us from the Wenatchee Valley Chamber of Commerce. Chamber is teaming up with us for our Community Connections podcast series, and we're featuring those before we put them in podcast form on our website here as part of our KOHO Morning Show on Tuesdays throughout the course of this month and the 3 months that we've got ahead of us as well. A nice 4-month partnership with the Chamber on this. We're starting with legacy businesses, of course, and that's what brings Shiloh to our studios today, along with Steve Goodfellow from Goodfellow Brothers General Contracting Services here in the Wenatchee Valley. A legacy business, and then some, you could say, celebrating their centennial 100 years of service to the Wenatchee Valley in 2021. And we're going to find out more about not only how they've managed to build that up over the course of 100 years' time, take us back through the history, but also look forward to the future as well. And Shiloh, Steve, I appreciate the time very much. Thanks.
Good, thank you.
So when we talk about 100 years in business, we are obviously not talking about the original owners. You know, we've moved on with that. I know, Shiloh, before we started here, you were just chatting with Steve about how businesses sort of go through their paces based on generational ownership, especially within a family framework. And it's just so amazing to see one that's still with us. I mean, any community, pick your largest metropolitan area or your smallest city in the United States, and trying to find a family-run, family-owned legacy business of this magnitude in 100 years, it's like finding a four-leaf clover. It's really difficult. So it's amazing that we have Steve here, not only with us in studio today to talk about it, but in the community in general.
Absolutely. We're so happy to have you with us, Steve, and to hear a little bit more. Let's start with your story. What is the origin story of Goodfellow Brothers, and then what is your origin story with the company as you got involved?
You know, the company was started by my grandfather and his two brothers. So picture World War I. They fought in World War I. They were in Paris, France. And when the war ended, they went to a little cafe and they said, you know, what are we going to do? We've just fought for our country and we want to go back and we want to do something. And they said, let's go back and help build our country. They were very patriotic. They loved the United States and they wanted to do something for it. So they came back. They went to the University of Washington. My grandfather graduated in engineering. One became a business major and the other was finance. And they looked around and decided Eastern Washington was an area that needed a lot of growth. They could foresee dams, they could foresee interstate highways, they could foresee irrigation canals to take water to the farmers, the roads so the farmers could get their crops to market. So they moved to Wenatchee. And my grandfather started out working for the state of Washington Highway Department, looking around for the right opportunity to start the business. And there was a job up Swakane Canyon, and they bid the job, and they were the low bidder. So it's 1921, back in the days when the Teamsters took care of the horses, because they hooked the horses onto the pieces of equipment to drag them out and build things. So they came here, they started the business, and we're always very proud to be contractors. They were always very proud to build those things that our country, that our community needed. And they were very connected to Wenatchee and to the Wenatchee Valley. My grandfather and raised his boys here, my father, Jim, and his brother, Bob. You know, I was born here. We've had a lot of generations that have all come from here in Wenatchee, but that was the beginning of the company.
General contracting in 1921 has to be a little different than in 2021. We don't have to get into all of the ways that is the case, I imagine, Steve. I wonder even more actually about not the ways that general contracting and as a general practice, as a business is concerned, has changed, but how many things have stayed the same in that regard? Is there anything that's the same as it was 100 years ago?
There's one thing, our values. The core values that the business was founded on. Our mission statement is to be the contractor of choice for our employees, looking out after our employees, being the contractor of choice for our clients, making sure that every client is happy, and being the contractor of choice in the communities in which we live and work. So our core values and mission has always been to make sure that we were looking after those three components. But to do that, it means you do what you say you're going to do. You treat people with respect. You build long-term relationships. It's not about a short-term gain or loss. Everything that you do is pointed towards a long-term relationship. I'll bet today probably 80% or more of our contracts are with customers we've done business with in the past. One of my grandfather's old sayings is, you can never have too many friends, but you cannot afford to have one enemy. So we never are litigious. We always solve our problems with our client, with whoever it is that we're doing business with. So the constant from day one has been the values that the company was founded on. Equipment changes, people change, methods of operations change. I mean, our world is full of change. And actually, one of our core tenets is continuous change. You know, we want to have a culture of continuous change. As technology changes come, as opportunities come with new types of equipment, new types of training for our employees. So we really embrace a culture of continuous change as a part of that core. But what never changes are the values.
That's amazing. So I have to ask, Goodfellow Brothers, a lot of folks might not know the scale of the projects that you all take on or the place in which you do them. Yes, your company's true headquarters is here, but you're in quite a few states and you've done quite a few amazing projects. Tell us about a couple of those. Tell us about the scale or the magnitude. I mean, you were legitimately describing the founder's dream of dams and roads and bridge. I mean, you've done some pretty significant things as a company. Share a few of those with the listeners.
Sure. Probably one of the ones that I think we're the most proud of is we did the first excavation on Grand Coulee Dam, the largest construction project in the history of the country at the time, still operating today, putting out lots of power and lots of water out to the Columbia Basin. And we had the contract to do the very first excavation there. So that was pretty exciting, and it was really an important time because that happened right after the Great Depression, and it gave us the opportunity to keep our people working during that time. Over the course of, from over 100 years, you really watch our country evolve, right? We had the interstate highway system. So all of the North Cross State Highway, we did more work on the North Cross State Highway than any other contractor. Stevens Pass, Snoqualmie Pass, all of the major roads. I-90 going through Idaho, going through Montana. In our business, we have to follow the work. If the work is in Alaska, we go to Alaska. If the work is in Hawaii, we went to Hawaii. If the work is in the mountains, we go hire a cook and we get a bunch of tents and we set up at camp and we go do the work in the mountains. We've done so many different things. So we moved to Hawaii. My father, Jim Goodfellow, we had a family connection to Hawaii that went back. My grandfather's sister lived in Hawaii. So we had a connection there, and an opportunity came to bid a job there. So we went over, we bid the job. I ended up moving over there and operating out of Hawaii. And we were there at the right time. And the Japanese came and they wanted to build golf courses. So we started building golf courses, and we ended up building about 20 golf courses. Some of those same golf course architects took us to Alaska and took us to other states. So over the course of time, we just kind of evolve. We opened up an operation down in California about 8 years ago. That's just a whole different type of environment there, but we do a lot of work for a lot of the major tech companies. We do a lot of work with housing, the 49ers Stadium, the Golden State Warriors Stadium. We love our environmental work. We do a tremendous amount of environmental work. We work with some of the different Indian groups, and we have a great relationship up at the Kootenays. We've worked with them, I think, for 8 to 10 years now straight. So it's just a variety. We have big, heavy equipment, and we've got great people. So what happens is we get a job, and then we get another one, and we just kind of follow it wherever it takes us.
Got to follow those relationships wherever they lead. That's amazing.
Steve Goodfellow with us today, owner of Goodfellow Brothers, a general contracting service celebrating 100 years of business here in the Wenatchee Valley, talking to us as part of our Legacy series with the Wenatchee Valley Chamber of Commerce. That's part of our Community Connections podcast series, of course. You can download this any place that you find your favorite podcasts at our website, KOHO101.com, as well as the Chamber's website. They'll have links there. And, of course, we're featuring these before they actually go into podcast form on our KOHO Morning Show as a live product here. So, Steve, I guess the first thing that I weave into as far as this 100 years of business with Goodfellow is concerned, just me personally, and I would invite everybody to kind of take their own stake in this, is I'm a driver. I love to go drive the open roads as much as possible as a hobby. That's what I do. And I know every time I go out there, I do the best I can to remember to say thank you to all of the men and women who helped in paving all of that asphalt, because I can chew up the miles, thousands and thousands of them. And it's really important to remember that this just wasn't here. This infrastructure didn't appear overnight somehow. It takes a lot of hard work to get to the point that a country, a nation has this kind of an infrastructure. So the people, sounds like, that literally worked for Goodfellow Brothers in some of these projects are responsible for some of the thank yous that I'm able to give right now. So thanks to you and to them for actually being responsible for paving some of those roads out there that I enjoy so much today that we take for granted.
Thank you for that. And at the same time, well, 45 years ago, I was one of the guys out there building those roads. For the last 40 years, I haven't picked up a shovel. So the men and women that actually are building those roads, they're the heroes. Okay, that's the heart and soul of any company. They are the people that are out there doing the work every day. And my grandfather, who started our business, my father, who continued it, my brother, who works with me in the business, my son, who runs the business now, we all realize none of this could happen except for the hard work of the many thousands of men and women over the years that have dedicated their lives to doing that work. And as you and I talked before the show, getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, whether it's rain, snow, hot, cold, whatever it is, and going out there and picking up a shovel or getting in a piece of equipment and going out and building this work is difficult. It is hard work. Actually, there was a study done of high school seniors that said, here's a list of 250 occupations. Put them in order. We came out number 249. The only one that was worse, was fishing for crab up in northern Alaska. Right? So the men and women that work so hard every single day and make us successful are the heroes, and they're the ones that I think inspire. It always inspired me. I know they inspired my grandfather, my father, my son, and my brother. They're the ones that inspire us every day. And they do deserve thanks, because it is hard work, and not only for the men and women that are working in the field, but for their families, because we are kind of a 24/7 company. Something goes wrong, and somebody's going to be on the phone, and you've got to go fix it. A landslide can come, a flood can come, all kinds of things come unexpectedly. And so it's a hard life for families as well as the people working there. But it's also very gratifying, as you can imagine, because then eventually we get to drive on that road that you get to drive on, and it feels good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the pride that goes along with that, saying, I helped do that.
You know, it's pretty cool to be able to go back into communities that my grandfather worked in 80 years ago and see a baseball field that somebody will say, you know, when your grandfather was here, he helped us build that baseball field. Or go to a little community and they'll say, you know, when you guys were here, we had a big flood, and that your company was the ones that came and bailed us out. And so it is very gratifying over the course of 100 years to see, if you can just do something every day or every week or every year, it all adds up over a period of time. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. Lunch pail and a hard hat. All those blue-collar workers really are the backbone of the United States, and none of this infrastructure would be here without it. So there's heroes all over the place, Steve, as you mentioned, that kind of go unheralded. So it's great we're able to recognize them today, and that you recognize them every day as a part of Goodfellow Brothers. You keep talking about the lineage, the pedigree, and all of this. Fathers, brothers, sons, etc. That, to me, is probably the most astounding part of what you've been able to compile with Goodfellow Brothers. 100 years in business is one thing, to see a business handed down even to different ownerships, but to leave it in the family, to have it actually grow like a tree and produce that fruit generation after generation, that's almost unheard of in this day and age. So I would love to know what the secret to that seed continuing to sprout every year, I guess, or grow every year, that tree, that family tree in business is.
You know, my grandfather would talk about his two brothers. So you had three brothers. And if either of you have brothers and sisters, I'm not sure that you want to spend every day with your brother and sister, whether it's in business or in life. But he would always say that they never had an argument. They respected each other, and they knew what they were doing was important. If your mission is important, and you can not put your own ego in front of what it is you're trying to accomplish, then it can work, and have a lot of respect for the family and for each other. So I was fortunate, because I grew up and I was very close to my grandfather, and he would talk about the importance of family as well as the importance of what you're doing. And so if you can focus on the mission and don't let the little things bug you too much if there's something that happens along the way. Now, it doesn't always work. I'll just share, in my dad's generation, he had a brother. And his brother was in the company for a period of time and then wasn't. And he was a brilliant guy, but it didn't work. And it was better for him to have a career outside the company. And in my case, my brother decided to come in the company, and it was great. He and I got to work together for 40 years. And so that worked out great. Unfortunately, my sister didn't want to go into the company, but I think the bottom line is we want the company to succeed. We're doing this for all of the men and women that work there. We're doing it for the communities that we serve. And if you keep that in mind, you got to kind of let some of the day-to-day interactions go.
I love that, because business is a synonym with community, right? Businesses choose the communities oftentimes to put their roots in to then, allow them to grow up. And so I love hearing that community is such a big focus for your company. Yeah. I also love that we wouldn't be here without our employees, and we wouldn't be here without our customers. Those are two key ingredients. So I have to ask, this will be my final question, Chris, but I have to ask, how have the employees or the customers of Goodfellow Brothers over the last 100 years shaped you? Is there anything tangible in your mind when you think about a certain employee or a group of employees because it was a transformative time in the company, or a particular customer that has left its mark in a way that you see will not only be here as you celebrate 100, but as you kind of move into the next 100, we hope, for this company?
So in 100 years, this is not a nice steady line on a graph. And in the construction business, we are really dependent upon government funding, private funding, people building things. And so when you go through a downturn in the economy, nobody wants to build anything. And so we have years that we're very busy, and then we have years that are pretty lean. My grandfather used to say, sometimes you eat chicken, sometimes you eat feathers, right? So we had some very difficult times, and right about in the mid-'80s, that was very difficult times. We actually probably were on the edge of ending our run right about that time. We were having a difficult time here in the mainland, and Hawaii was doing pretty well. So we ended up kind of shutting everything down on the mainland and just focusing on the market that we had in Hawaii. And that was largely because we had a lot of Japanese investment going on in Hawaii where it wasn't happening here in the mainland. So we got over there, and it was down to where we really had to do well. So we had a meeting, and I got a bunch of the guys together. And there's a bunch of the local guys, and if any of you go to Hawaii, I think they have some of the finest people in the world, some of the biggest hearts. And we sat down and we said, look, this job's got to be successful. We're kind of teetering one way or the other, and we've really got to go out here and make it happen. So there's a guy, Danny Collier, that was there, big guy, 6'5", 250 pounds, local Hawaiian. We have mostly all Hawaiians that work for us in Hawaii. And he says, no worry, boss, no worry. So then he takes that out into the field. The guys start coming in a little bit early. They start working a little bit late. The end of the shift, they would say, okay, we're going to go put in an extra piece of pipe for the boss. At the end of the shift, they go get one extra piece of pipe. In our business, one piece of pipe is the difference between making money and losing money. And they put in that extra piece of pipe. The guys loading the trucks, let's have an extra load for the boss. And they'd have an extra load for the boss. The project went well, and that whole feeling of taking something and making it successful and giving back to the company was huge. And that just continued to spread. And today, it's kind of one of the things that we talk about is, how about one extra load for the boss? But, I remember another time my grandfather talked about on a project where the checks didn't come in. And he had to go up to the job site and tell the boys they weren't going to get paid. And he would say, I went up there, I got everybody together, and I said, the checks didn't come in. I'm not going to be able to pay you. They always called him Mr. Jim. And they said, don't worry, Mr. Jim. We know you'll pay us when you can. and they all go back to work, and they work just as hard, and then they got paid when they could. So there's a lot of stories like that throughout a 100-year history where you have your ups and your downs, but it really shows you the heart and soul of the people that are out there working. They truly care. And when you need help, it's there.
Wow, that's,
I love it.
Yeah, amazing. And there's a book that chronicles some of this, actually, that you've put together as well, Steve, that just came out.
Yeah. We worked for the last couple of years trying to find all the old pictures and all the old stories and talk about the values of the company and talk about some of the transitional challenges that we faced. And we thought that certainly for everyone that works within the company or that works with our company, we thought it might be fun. And then we have additional copies if somebody's interested about what happens in a family business.
Well, we have one of them in studio here in front of Shiloh, and it's a beautiful book. Yeah,
I just got it autographed today by Steve. It's fantastic, and I love it. I love the little tagline underneath, which says, "A century of grit, grace, and goodwill."
And 3 Gs.
The 3 Gs.
At least part of the 3 Gs. From the G in Goodfellow. Steve Goodfellow with us today, owner of Goodfellow Brothers, general contractor service, again, celebrating their centennial this year, one of the legacy business interviews we're doing here as part of our series with the Wenatchee Valley Chamber of Commerce on KOHO. And as part of our Community Connections podcast series, Steve, I really appreciate the time today. Thanks for sharing your story with us and being a part of the series. And Shiloh, again, thanks for kind of facilitating all of this and the Chamber's involvement in it as well. I can't wait for the next go-around. So.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
This is the KOHO 101 Community Connection Podcast. Check back often for a continuing look at business in the greater Wenatchee area.